Hello everybody! Welcome to Social Studies with Ms. Rogers World History Edition. Today we are going to talk about our second out of the 4 ancient river valley civilizations, which will be ancient Egypt, or if you want to use the more historical term, the Nile River Valley Civilization. To start with Egypt, I want to remember back to our first class when we said that Africa is not just one big country. Africa is a continent with a whole lot of countries in it, and Egypt is one of those countries. It's a place where the history and the culture of its people dates back thousands of years. The Nile River, which is located in Egypt, is the longest river in the entire world. It provided a home to the ancient people who were a part of the Nile River Valley Civilization. The Nile River's flooding was so consistent that the ancient Egyptians referred to the river's yearly flooding as the miracle of the Nile. It left a deposit of mud that created an area of really rich soil about several miles wide on both sides of the river. And with this fertile soil, the farmers made a surplus of food. It was amazing, and it made Egypt incredibly prosperous. The river was also the fastest way to travel throughout the land, and it made both transportation and communication a whole lot easier for the people who lived along the river. It also helped promote trade along the river as well. Yesterday we talked about how Mesopotamia, was in the middle of the desert, but that was it when it came to natural barriers. So they had to build walls around their cities, and they still were subject to invasion all the time. Egypt was totally different. Egypt was blessed with natural barriers that gave it protection from all sides. These barriers not only included a desert in the west and the east, but also the Mediterranean Sea in the north, the rapids of the Nile in the south, and the Red Sea to the east. So many natural barriers. So the people of ancient Egypt, or the Nile River Valley Civilization, knew that they weren't going to be subject to a lot of attacks, meaning that they could live a much more relaxed lifestyle. The regularity of the Nile floods and the relative isolation of the Egyptians created this feeling of security and changelessness. And what that means is that these people were so stable in regards to always having food, never really facing any real threats, that their way of life and their culture pretty much stayed the exact same for thousands of years. They say that Egypt's history begins with King Narmer, who unified both Upper and Lower Egypt into a single kingdom and created the first dynasty that we have any kind of record of. To signify the unification, Egyptian pharaohs would start wearing a double-sided crown, just like this one. I do want to talk about the Egyptian creation story of the world because I love this stuff. I think it's so interesting. But before I do, I want to preface that there are many different versions of Egyptian myths, and it really just depends on what part of Egypt the person telling the story is from. So if you've heard a different version, you're not wrong. You might have just heard a different version than I have. And so we begin! According to the ancient Egyptians, at first there was nothing. And by pure willpower, Atum created himself. Wait a second, pure willpower? I don't even like to put on my makeup in the morning. Do you know the kind of things I could get done with my life if I had that kind of willpower? I don't think it's gonna happen for me. Atum also had an all-seeing eye that could roam the entire universe. Atum didn't want to be alone anymore, so he combined with his shadow to make a son and a daughter. Atum gave birth to his son by spitting him out. He named him Shu and made him the god of air. Atum then vomited up his daughter. He named her Tefnut and made her the goddess of moisture and mist. Tefnut and Shu were tasked with creating stability in the world. They also created Jeb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. At first, Jeb and Nut were tangled together as one. Shu had to shove Nut up into the heavens, and there she would remain. Shu and Tefnut would produce other gods and goddesses like Nephthys, Osiris, Isis, Hathor, Set, Tot, and so many more. One day, Shu and Tefnut got lost, and Atum was so frantic and desperate to find them. Atum sent his all-seeing eye to search for them throughout the heavens and the galaxy. Eventually, the eye did return with Shu and Tefnut, and Atum was so happy to see his children again that he started sobbing. As Atum's happy tears hit the ground, they grew into what would be known as the first humans to ever walk the earth. These humans promised to maintain the order that the gods put in place and promised to continue to worship them for the rest of their days. In return, the gods would love and protect the humans. Which brings us to our social structure of Egypt. At the top of the pyramid, we have pharaohs, who are the monarchs of Egypt. They have absolute power throughout the land. Pharaohs were able to possess so much power because people actually believed that they were gods themselves. In fact, pharaohs were said to be the sons of Ra, who was the sun god, therefore one of the most important gods of all of Egypt mythology. People believed that if the pharaohs were happy, then the gods were also happy, and that kept balance within the world. And remember, they believed that if the gods were happy, the god would continue to reward them with harvests and protect them. This is also why people were more willing to spend most of their lives building pyramids for these pharaohs and their families. Pharaohs would want super elaborate pyramids to be built for their burial because in their mind, the greater the pyramid, the greater the pharaoh he was. These pyramids were built as a larger complex of buildings just dedicated to these dead pharaohs. The area included a giant pyramid for the pharaoh's burial, smaller pyramids for his family members, and several rectangular structures for the pharaoh's officials. Ancient Egyptians believed that when you die, your heart is weighed on a scale with the feather of Ma'at, or the feather of truth and justice. They say that if your heart has more good than bad in it, you'll be allowed to enter the field of reeds, which is definitely the goal because that's Egyptian eternal paradise. However, if your heart didn't pass the test, you were deemed unworthy of the field of reeds. Anubis would then cast your heart onto the floor, and Amit, or the gobbler, would then eat your heart and you would cease to exist. Ancient Egyptians didn't believe in a place like hell or purgatory, so you either ceased to exist or you were able to move on to the field of reeds forever. To prepare pharaohs to enter the Sea of Reeds, because obviously all pharaohs have to get in, right? They will put a lot of gold, possessions, food, everything into the pharaoh's tomb because they believe that whatever they have with them when they are buried, they will take to the afterlife with them. Fun fact, you'll also find lots of cat statues everywhere, especially in tombs, because they believe that cats can scare away evil. Looks like I'm safe! Because Egyptians thought that a dead person's soul still had a spiritual connection to the physical world, they felt that preserving bodies were important as well, and that's where mummification comes in. Mummification is a process to slowly dry a dead body and prevent it from rotting. It's a very expensive process, so usually it's only upper-class, wealthy people who are able to afford it in ancient Egypt. The goal is to take an iron hook and get out as many organs as they can, so they'll typically take a hook, shove it up your nostrils, and pull out your brain through your nose. Wow, sounds like a spa day! The other organs that they're going to try and yank out of your body when you're mummified include your liver, your lungs, your stomach, your intestines, and they're all going to go in cute little jars and surround your body while you're dead. Now to finally get back to the social pyramid, we have our next in line, which is going to be government officials, aka, most important, the viziers. The viziers answer directly to the pharaoh. They pretty much are the pharaoh's right-hand man, but they're going to oversee the entire government for the pharaoh. Because, when you're a pharaoh, you have more important things to do than worry about running your government, right? Your high nobles and priests will have the honor to join the pharaoh in many of his rituals within his palace. However, just as the vizier oversees the government and how it's run, the nobles and the priests will run the government for the vizier, so they answer directly to him. Next is your warriors, and they're going to be considered important in many different civilizations because they protect everyone, so clearly that means everyone should respect them, right? The middle class will consist of scribes and merchants who don't live luxuriously, but live pretty comfortably. The lower class or the working class will be craftsmen, aka your specialized workers, and as always, your peasants, who are going to work the fields and the farms of the pharaoh. The bottom of the totem pole in any civilization that has slaves will always be slaves. No social class has it worse than them, and most civilizations at this time do have slaves. How do we know so much about the ancient Egyptians? Well, hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics were a system of writing that the ancient Egyptians created around 3000 BC. The Greeks called this Egyptian writing hieroglyphics, meaning priest carvings or sacred writing. It's an incredibly complex system. Our ability to read hieroglyphics is actually pretty new in world history. In 1799, a French captain named Pierre Bouchard was supervising the restoration of an old fort near the town of Rosetta. This was actually during the Napoleonic Wars, which we will learn about later. He ended up finding a block of basalt about 3 feet 9 inches tall. I know what you're thinking right now, Miss Rogers kids. No, that's not taller than me. I'm not that short. And on this stone, there were 3 different sections with 3 different languages on it. Hieroglyphics, Demotic, and Greek. Demotic is probably something you've never heard of before, and it is still the Egyptian language. It's just more of the common Egyptian script. Since we as a world have never lost our understanding of ancient Greek, the Greek inscriptions provided an essential key to decoding the Egyptian equivalents. The last sentence of the Greek text says, "written in sacred and native and Greek characters." Scholars were really quick to figure out that this meant that the same text was written down 3 times in the 3 different scripts. And that's how we were able to decipher the Rosetta Stone, which again is named because it was found in the town of Rosetta. There's usually a few kids really confused as to why something like the Rosetta Stone would be in existence. And we're not there in history yet, we will be soon, but there will be a time where the Greeks do control parts of Egypt. So this was most likely created so that everyone in the area could read it. And it's such a good thing too, because without the Rosetta Stone, we would know nothing of the ancient Egyptians, and the details of their 3,000 years of history would be a mystery. And then I wouldn't get to hear about my dream civilization that worships cats. They clearly have their priorities in order. We have officially covered our second out of the 4 River Valley civilizations, so we are 2 down, 2 to go. Next, we're going to cover the Indus River Valley Civilization, so I'll see you guys then.